The rain hammered against the windows of Murphy's bar as Sarah Martinez sat alone at the corner table, nursing her second beer of the evening. At 28, she looked like any other young woman, unwinding after a long day at work. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore jeans and a plain black sweater. Nothing about her appearance suggested she had just returned from a classified mission in Eastern Europe. Sarah had been looking forward to this quiet evening. After 18 months of intense deployments, she finally had some leave time. Her family thought she worked as a logistics coordinator for the Navy, a cover story that allowed her to maintain her real identity as one of the few female Navy SEALs in active service. The bar was typical for this part of town: dim lighting, worn wooden floors, and the smell of fried food hanging in the air. Most of the customers were locals who came here to watch sports and forget about their troubles. Sarah had chosen this place specifically because it was far from any military installations, where she was less likely to run into anyone who might recognize her. She was scrolling through her phone, catching up on messages from friends, when she noticed 4 men at the bar stealing glances in her direction. They looked to be in their early 20s, probably college students from the university nearby. One of them, a tall guy with blonde hair and an expensive jacket, seemed to be the leader of the group. He kept whispering something to his friends, who would then look over at Sarah and snicker. Sarah had dealt with unwanted attention before. Her training had taught her to be aware of her surroundings at all times, and she could sense when people were watching her. She decided to ignore them and focus on her beer, hoping they would lose interest and leave her alone. But the 4 men had other plans. After another round of drinks, they became louder and more confident. The blonde one, who the others called Jake, started making comments about the lonely girl in the corner. His friends laughed and encouraged him. Clearly thinking this was some kind of game, Sarah could hear fragments of their conversation. They were talking about approaching her, about how easy it would be to convince her to come with them. The way they spoke made her skin crawl. These weren't just college boys looking to flirt. There was something darker in their intentions. She watched them in the reflection of her phone screen, noting their positions and body language. Jake was clearly the ringleader, while the other 3, a stocky redhead, a thin guy with glasses, and a muscular brunette, seemed eager to follow his lead. They had been drinking for a while, and their movements were becoming less coordinated. The bartender, an older man with graying hair, seemed oblivious to the tension building in his establishment. He was busy cleaning glasses and chatting with a regular customer at the other end of the bar. The few other patrons were absorbed in the basketball game playing on the television screens. Sarah finished her beer and was about to leave when Jake stood up from his bar stool. He said something to his friends that made them laugh, then started walking toward her table. His friends followed closely behind, spreading out slightly as they approached. Sarah recognized the formation immediately. They were trying to surround her table, cutting off her escape routes. "Hey there, beautiful," Jake said as he reached her table. His breath reeked of whiskey, and his eyes had a glazed look that Sarah had seen before in dangerous situations. "Mind if we join you? A pretty girl like you shouldn't be drinking alone." Sarah looked up at him calmly. "I'm fine, thanks. I was just leaving." She started to stand, but Jake moved closer, blocking her path. "Come on. Don't be like that. We're just being friendly. Why don't you let us buy you a drink?" The other 3 had positioned themselves around the table now. The redhead was near the wall. The guy with glasses stood by the entrance, and the muscular one had moved to block the path to the restrooms. They thought they were being clever, but Sarah could see exactly what they were doing. "I said I'm fine," Sarah repeated, her voice remaining steady. She had learned long ago that showing fear only encouraged predators like these. Jake's friendly mask began to slip. "Look, sweetheart, we're trying to be nice here. You don't want to make this difficult." The threat in his voice was clear now. Sarah could see the anticipation in his friends' faces. They had probably done this before, cornering women who couldn't defend themselves. They had chosen their target carefully. A woman alone, smaller than any of them, in a dimly lit bar where other patrons might not notice what was happening. Sarah remained seated, appearing calm while her mind automatically shifted into tactical mode. She assessed the distances, angles, and potential weapons within reach. The beer bottle in her hand could be useful. The chairs were heavy enough to cause damage. The table could provide cover or be used as a barrier. But more than anything, Sarah felt a cold anger building inside her. These men had made a fundamental error in judgment. They saw a woman alone and assumed she was helpless. They had no idea that the person they were trying to intimidate had survived combat missions in some of the most dangerous places on Earth. Jake reached out to grab her arm. "Come on. Let's go somewhere more private, where we can really get to know each other." That was when Sarah decided she had heard enough. In less than 20 seconds, these four men were about to learn that their carefully planned trap had backfired in the worst possible way. The moment Jake's hand made contact with Sarah's arm, everything changed. What happened next would be replayed in the security footage that the police would review later, though even then it would be difficult to follow the speed of Sarah's movements. Sarah's right hand shot up faster than any of the four men could process, catching Jake's wrist in a grip that made him gasp in pain. At the same time, she pivoted in her chair and drove her left elbow into his solar plexus with surgical precision. The blow knocked the wind out of him instantly, and he doubled over, struggling to breathe. The stocky redhead, who had been standing to her left, moved forward to help his friend. Sarah released Jake's wrist and swept her leg in a wide arc, catching the redhead behind the knees. As he fell backward, she grabbed the heavy wooden chair beside her and swung it in a controlled arc that connected with his shoulder, sending him crashing into the wall. The entire sequence had taken less than 3 seconds. The guy with glasses, who had been blocking the entrance, hesitated for a crucial moment. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. His two friends were on the ground, and this woman who had seemed so helpless was now standing between the scattered chairs, looking completely calm. That hesitation cost him. Sarah moved toward him with fluid, economical steps. He threw a wild punch that she easily deflected, using his momentum to spin him around before applying a chokehold that dropped him to his knees in seconds. She released him before he lost consciousness completely, but he collapsed onto the floor, gasping and disoriented. The muscular brunette, who had positioned himself near the restrooms, was the only one still standing. Unlike his friends, he had some experience fighting. He had been on his high school wrestling team and worked out regularly. He thought his size and strength would give him an advantage. He charged at Sarah with his arms outstretched, trying to tackle her. Sarah sidestepped at the last moment, grabbed his outstretched arm, and used his forward momentum to send him flying over her shoulder. He crashed into a table, scattering glasses and sending beer flying across the floor. The entire confrontation had lasted exactly 17 seconds. The bar had gone completely silent, except for the sound of the basketball game still playing on the televisions. The bartender stood frozen behind the counter, a glass in his hand, staring at the scene in disbelief. The few other customers had turned to watch, their conversations forgotten. Sarah straightened her sweater and calmly picked up her purse from the table. Jake was still on the floor, holding his stomach and trying to catch his breath. The redhead was slumped against the wall, his shoulder clearly injured. The guy with glasses was sitting on the floor, rubbing his throat and looking dazed. The muscular one was groaning among the wreckage of the table he had crashed into. "Anyone else want to buy me a drink?" Sarah asked, her voice carrying just enough edge to make it clear she wasn't joking. The bartender finally found his voice. "Lady, I don't know what just happened here, but maybe you should call the police." Sarah looked around at the four men she had just disabled. They were all conscious but clearly in no condition to cause any more trouble. Jake was finally able to sit up, though he was still struggling to breathe normally. When he looked at Sarah, the arrogance and aggression in his eyes had been replaced by fear and confusion. Who are you?" he wheezed. Sarah considered her answer carefully. Her real identity was classified, and she couldn't reveal her military background without potentially compromising ongoing operations. But these men needed to understand that they had made a serious mistake. "Someone you should have left alone," she said simply. The redhead was trying to move his injured shoulder, wincing with pain. "You broke my shoulder," he complained. "It's dislocated, not broken." Sarah corrected him. "Be grateful I was holding back." The guy with glasses was slowly getting to his feet, using the wall for support. "This is crazy. We were just trying to talk to you." Sarah's expression hardened. You cornered me, blocked my exits, and made threats. That's not talking. That's predatory behavior. The muscular brunette finally managed to extricate himself from the broken table. He was bleeding from a small cut on his forehead, but otherwise seemed uninjured. Unlike his friends, he didn't try to argue or make excuses. He just stared at Sarah with a mixture of respect and wariness. You're military, he said. It wasn't a question. Sarah didn't confirm or deny his statement, but her silence was answer enough. The bartender had recovered from his shock and was reaching for his phone. I'm calling the cops. This is my bar, and I can't have people fighting in here. That's fine, Sarah said. But you might want to check your security cameras first. They'll show exactly who started this confrontation. Jake struggled to his feet, still holding his stomach. The pain and humiliation had replaced his earlier confidence, but some of his anger remained. You can't just assault people like that. We could sue you. Sarah almost smiled at that. You could try. But first you'd have to explain to a judge why 4 grown men cornered one woman in a bar and tried to force her to leave with them. I'm sure that conversation would go well for you. The reality of their situation was starting to sink in for the 4 men. They had attacked a woman who was clearly trained in combat. And they had done it in front of witnesses, with security cameras recording everything. Any legal action they might consider would only highlight their own criminal behavior. The police arrived within 10 minutes, responding to the bartender's call. 2 officers entered the bar and immediately assessed the scene. 4 injured men, 1 unharmed woman, and several witnesses who all seemed eager to tell their version of events. Sarah remained calm as the officers questioned everyone present. The other customers confirmed that the 4 men had approached her table uninvited and had positioned themselves to prevent her from leaving. The security footage supported their statements, clearly showing the men surrounding Sarah before she defended herself. What impressed the officers most was the controlled nature of Sarah's response. Despite being outnumbered 4-1, she had neutralized the threat without causing any permanent injuries. Her movements on the camera were precise and professional, suggesting extensive training. The 4 attackers told a different story, claiming they had just been trying to be friendly and that Sarah had overreacted. But their version of events didn't match the evidence, and their injuries told a clear story of a one-sided fight. As the officers continued their investigation, word of the incident began to spread beyond the bar. Someone had recorded part of the confrontation on their phone, and the video started making its way around social media. The footage showed a woman half the size of her attackers systematically taking down 4 men who had tried to corner her. The police completed their initial investigation and determined that Sarah had acted in self-defense. The 4 men were arrested on charges of attempted assault and intimidation. As they were led away in handcuffs, they kept looking back at Sarah, still trying to process what had happened to them. But the story was far from over. The viral video had caught the attention of people who recognized signs of advanced military training. Questions were being asked about who this woman really was and how she had acquired such extraordinary fighting skills. Sarah knew that her quiet evening had turned into something much more complicated. The incident had revealed capabilities that she had hoped to keep hidden, and now she would have to deal with the consequences of her exposure. By the next morning, the video of Sarah's confrontation with the 4 men had been viewed over 2 million times across various social media platforms. News outlets were picking up the story, calling it, "Woman destroys 4 attackers in bar fight," and "Mysterious fighter teaches predators a lesson." The footage was being analyzed frame by frame by martial arts experts and military veterans who recognized the techniques Sarah had used. Sarah woke up in her small apartment to find 17 missed calls on her phone. Her commanding officer, Captain Jennifer Walsh, had left 3 increasingly urgent voicemails asking her to report to base immediately. Sarah knew this couldn't be good news. She arrived at the naval base 2 hours later, still trying to process the magnitude of what had happened. The security guard at the gate gave her a knowing nod. Clearly, word had already spread throughout the military community. As she made her way to Captain Walsh's office, she noticed other service members looking at her with a mixture of curiosity and respect. Captain Walsh was waiting for her with a tablet displaying the viral video. "Martinez, I've had calls from reporters, military bloggers, and even a documentary filmmaker asking about you. Care to explain how your cover got blown over a bar fight? Sarah sat down and gave her superior a detailed account of the previous evening's events. She explained how she had tried to avoid confrontation, how the 4 men had cornered her, and how she had been forced to defend herself. Throughout her explanation, Captain Walsh watched the video repeatedly, studying Sarah's movements. "Your technique is flawless," the captain admitted. "But you realize this creates a massive security problem. Your identity as a SEAL was classified for good reasons. Now half the internet is trying to figure out who you are." The implications were serious. Sarah's missions often required her to operate undercover in hostile territory. If her real identity became public knowledge, it could compromise not only her own safety but also the safety of her teammates and the success of future operations. "There's more," Captain Walsh continued, pulling up news articles on her computer. "The 4 men you fought have connections we didn't know about. Jake Morrison, the ringleader, is the son of Congressman Robert Morrison. The family is claiming this was an unprovoked attack and demanding a full investigation." Sarah felt her heart sink. A political scandal was the last thing the Navy needed, especially one involving a classified operative. The congressman had significant influence over military budgets and could make life difficult for the entire SEAL program if he chose to pursue this matter. But then Captain Walsh smiled. "However, there are some unexpected developments working in our favor." She turned her screen around to show Sarah a news report from a local television station. A reporter was interviewing several women who had come forward to share their own experiences with Jake Morrison and his friends. Apparently, their behavior at Murphy's Bar wasn't an isolated incident. 3 women have filed formal complaints with the police, Captain Walsh explained. 2 more have given statements to reporters about similar encounters. "It turns out your 4 attackers had been doing this for months, targeting women in bars around the university area." The investigation that followed Sarah's confrontation had uncovered a pattern of predatory behavior that had gone unreported for too long. The security footage from Murphy's Bar had given other victims the courage to speak out about their own experiences. One woman, a graduate student named Maria Santos, had been approached by the same group 6 months earlier. She described how they had used identical tactics, surrounding her table, blocking her exits, and making increasingly aggressive demands for her to leave with them. Maria had managed to escape when the bartender intervened, but the encounter had left her traumatized and afraid to go out alone. Another victim, Ashley Chen, had not been so fortunate. She had been forced to leave a bar with the 4 men and had been assaulted in Jake Morrison's car before managing to break free and run. She had been too ashamed and scared to report the incident to police, but seeing Sarah's video had inspired her to finally seek justice. The public reaction was swift and decisive. Instead of sympathy for the 4 men who had been injured, people were praising Sarah for standing up to predators. The hashtag #BarroomJustice began trending on social media, with thousands of people sharing their own stories of unwanted advances and assault. Congressman Morrison tried to control the narrative, claiming his son was the victim of a vicious attack by a trained killer. But as more women came forward with their stories, public opinion turned against him. Editorial writers pointed out that his son's behavior was inexcusable regardless of the consequences he faced. The military's public relations department saw an opportunity in the situation. Rather than try to suppress the story, they decided to use it to highlight the positive aspects of women serving in combat roles. Sarah was approached about giving interviews, but she declined, preferring to maintain what remained of her privacy. Instead, the Navy released a carefully crafted statement, acknowledging that one of their personnel had been forced to defend herself against multiple attackers in a civilian setting. They emphasized that all service members are trained to protect themselves and others, and that Sarah had used minimal necessary force to neutralize a credible threat. The 4 attackers faced serious legal consequences for their actions. Jake Morrison was expelled from the university and faced charges of assault, attempted kidnapping, and conspiracy. The evidence from the other victims strengthened the prosecution's case considerably. His father's political influence couldn't protect him from the overwhelming evidence of his criminal behavior. The redhead, whose name was Kevin Fletcher, had his shoulder properly treated at the hospital and was also expelled from school. The injury would heal completely, but his reputation was permanently damaged. The guy with glasses, Tom Bradley, faced similar charges and consequences. The muscular brunette, Mike Torres, actually reached out to Sarah through her lawyer to apologize for his role in the incident. Sarah's identity as a Navy SEAL remained officially classified, but military personnel who saw the video recognized her training immediately. Within the special operations community, she became something of a legend, the SEAL who took down 4 attackers in a bar fight without breaking a sweat. The incident also led to positive changes in the local community. The university implemented new safety programs and increased security around popular student hangouts. Several bars in the area installed better lighting and trained their staff to recognize and intervene in situations where customers were being harassed. Murphy's Bar became an unexpected tourist attraction, with people coming from around the country to see where the SEAL bar fight had taken place. The bartender, whose name was Frank Sullivan, found himself giving interviews to news crews and posing for pictures with visitors. 6 months later, Sarah was preparing for deployment to Southeast Asia when she received an unexpected letter. It was from Ashley Chen, one of Jake Morrison's previous victims. Ashley wrote to thank Sarah for giving her the courage to report her assault and seek justice. She had started therapy to deal with her trauma and was planning to become a counselor to help other assault survivors. The letter reminded Sarah why she had chosen to serve her country in the first place. Her mission wasn't just about fighting enemies overseas. It was about protecting people who couldn't protect themselves. Sometimes that meant conducting covert operations in hostile territory, and sometimes it meant standing up to predators in a neighborhood bar. As she prepared for her deployment, Sarah reflected on how drastically her life had changed because of those 20 seconds in Murphy's Bar. Her cover had been blown, her face was recognized by millions of people, and her quiet anonymity was gone forever. But she had also helped bring dangerous criminals to justice, inspired other victims to seek help, and shown the world that predators who target vulnerable people might find themselves facing someone who could fight back. The 4 men who had tried to trap her learned the hard way that they had chosen the wrong target. Sarah Martinez had never wanted to be famous, but she was proud of the message her actions had sent. In a world where too many people feel powerless against those who would harm them, sometimes it takes just 20 seconds to prove that the predators don't always win. The lesson was simple. Be careful who you choose to corner in a dark bar. You never know when that quiet woman in the corner might be a Navy SEAL.